Well, I appreciate your time. That's a big thing for me. I
Of
really
course.
do want to say that. I thank you
Yeah, of
for
course,
taking
man.
time out. Um,
Yeah, of course.
so essentially, just to give you a little bit of context, I think I gave you some already, but the idea is, I think that myself included, the community has a common misconception of what it actually looks like in a day to day for like an esports competitor. And obviously that varies
Yeah.
depending on what tier they're at, I would think, to a large
hmm
degree. Obviously,
hmm
someone climbing rank should probably not be grinding as many hours as someone playing in the OWCS. There's a
Yeah.
disparity there.
Yeah.
But there is this thought, it seems like the common theme is one of two extremes. Either A, the extreme is they play the game 16 hours a day. They never leave the computer. They don't know anybody. Grass is foreign, and that's kind of it. The other extreme is like, oh well, they're just so good at the game that they can just play for like 4 hours a day, 2 scrim blocks, and that's it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel like there's probably somewhere in the middle that would probably be more accurate, but I don't know. So I'm
Yeah.
reaching out to folks that might know a little more than I do, and
Sure.
yeah, just kind of if you want to
Sure.
kind of paint a picture of what you see, and then I can give you some more like structure to some of the
Yeah.
questions and stuff I have too.
Yeah, sure. Give me what tier do you want to start with here? Like where to get to what level? I mean, obviously it's contextual, but where do you want to start with it?
I think that the ultimate question is tier one. You know, you're talking
Yeah.
OWCS, like
Okay.
tier one is really the
Yeah.
focal point of the conversation.
Right. I've chatted and worked with probably around 20 to 30 tier one players over the years, either that have become tier one or who are in tier one. And basically, I mean, it really is a full time job.
Hmm.
You're working at least 8 hours a day, sometimes as many 10 or 12. When I say working, I'm generally counting like either very, very high quality hours or medium quality hours. There's lots
Right.
of other pros that do a lot more than that, but I don't think that they get full value out of it.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
generally, that's kind of broken down into, I would say, probably three tiers of specific work. One is going to be the scrim hours. And for most teams, that's going to be anywhere from 4 to 6. I personally have always been a subscriber of the 4 hours of scrims a day. I've been part of many teams at both the tier two and tier one level that have done 6 hours of scrims. And it is the exception, not the rule, that those are productive
Sure.
because generally the amount of effort that scrimmages require is like the highest level of effort and focus, like full energy, full time, not a lot of downtime, not a lot of breaks, even if you're taking your 5 minute break. And so after those 4 hours, generally that's like where all your energy and effort went into. The second tier of break that I would say of work section would be more educational study. This would be team review, individual review, self review, whatever that may be. I don't know a lot of pro players that do a ton of review on every day. I would say a good balance would be anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours, depending on the team. Most teams that I have coached myself or have been part of generally have a balance of around 30 minutes to an hour of team review per day. And then anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes of individual review, either self review or with another coach on that same day. And that can depend on the difficulty of the coaching. Sometimes we have to teach a new concept and give ourselves some goals for the scrimmage. That's generally the most important review, usually at the start.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
then individual review can be on an as needed basis. Some of my reviews would go very, very long with Overwatch League players, but generally that was introducing a concept, discussing, and then further follow-up reviews would generally be much shorter, just status checks. How's the practice going? How are the questions? I'm POVing you during the scrim block. These are a couple of awkward points. Let's try and hammer these out, but it's going to be really, really fast. And then I think something that's I think underrated by a lot of tier one players, certainly by tier two and tier three players, is the ability to study POVs other
Hmm.
than themselves and also study POVs of themselves, just self review, spending time yourself, getting new ideas, introducing themselves to new concepts, new rotations, and just kind of not necessarily looking for feedback or advice from players better than themselves, but also critiquing those players. Like when I'm watching Proper on Tracer, let's see what he's doing well. Let's see if I can pick out the mistakes that he's making, right? Then let's go look back at my play and let's try to find the differences, things that I'm doing better than him, things that he's doing better than me. Let's get some goals. Just give yourself a different perspective. And then the third tier of work is what I just kind of call like the brainless mechanical work. And this is just going to be basically grinding ranked.
Sure.
You're going in, you're playing ranked, you're doing whatever. We were in an awkward position at the start of Overwatch 2 because we didn't have ranked. We only had quick play for a very brief period of time, and then we didn't have anything at all. So a lot of teams were doing 3 scrum blocks. Um, I know at the time that there was definitely a concerted effort to try to give full effort for 3 scrim blocks. But I honestly think if you're playing ranked as a pro player, you might get like an hour of good ranked play. But if you're playing ranked for the most part, it's just kind of like brainless mechanical grind, nothing really deliberate or nothing really specific. It can be especially useful if you're trying to sharpen up your mechanics on a character that you're not as strong with. But for the most part, I think like at that point in time, it's mostly just fluff. And you're probably better off at that point in time after an hour or two of rank, just stepping away from the PC, playing something else, being social, getting exercise, reading a book, doing something along those lines to make yourself in a better position for the next day.
Yeah, and I think what you kind of alluded to, especially at the end there, is super important. And I think that's the thing that I assumed, but I was cautious in making the assumption, being that I don't actually know,
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
there is a balance. Like, you have to have a life outside of
Hmm.
the game, even if the game is your source of income, it's your
Hmm.
primary focus, all those things. You have to have a life outside of it. That
Hmm.
life can look very different depending on the type of person you are and, your interests and those kinds of things. But
Yeah.
I do think that that's really important, and I think that's
No.
something that a lot of people get confused, is that the
Yeah.
game
Yeah.
is, yes, the focal point, but it is not your entire life.
Yeah. It's tricky too because a lot of people get to that position from no lifing it, right? Like you got
You're
either
right.
people that are 17 years old that they will literally, most tier two players that I know were kind of middling performing students. Not because they were stupid, but because school wasn't a huge priority. They came home from school, they grind rank until scrims until 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, and they go to bed, rinse and repeat for 2, 3 years, right? Like that's literally all that they do. Now that you're a professional, um, your body is like demands a higher output of performance, and you need that sort of consistency. And you're also playing at a level where just playing the game isn't good enough. I think almost without exception, I'd say good 75, 80, 85% of players, if you put them in a ranked environment and said you have to play ranked 6 or 7 hours a day, I think most, if not all, would really do well. I think they would get to diamond, masters, grandmaster, depending on the player.
Sure.
But at a certain point, you have to, okay, being grandmaster isn't meaningless in profa. You got to be way better than
Oh,
that. Like you
there's
have to
a
be the
huge
best
skill
version of
disparity.
yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to be the best version of yourself. And obviously, a lot of that is mechanical as well as cooldown oriented. But whether you're trying to improve your mechanics, your game sense, your communication, whatever, it demands a level of energy and focus. And anything that you're doing at that point in time, kind of autopilot, doesn't really do anything. And if it can anything, harm you. And so it just requires a level of intensity of work that is unusually difficult. Like if you're a professional player, you only have, I would say, anywhere from 4 to 5 hours of intense work per day. But you will find successful teams that actually have 4 to 5 hours of intense work per day. There's a famous anecdote that gets swapped around a lot of the season one Shanghai Dragons, who I think scrimmed anywhere from 3 to 6 blocks per day and lost every game. Right now, they were a bad team. Like they had a lot of really bad players. They just were never going to be able to play catch up to that level. But the worst thing they could have done in that position was to do that and just grind brainlessly and just there's no intention with what you're doing. And so most teams I know, it's not through a lack of visible effort, it's through a lack of actual effort that they're actually able to make progress as a team or as an individual.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. It's not always what people are, as you just put it, visualizing, like what people
Yep.
see. And I think a lot of people
Yep.
get that confused, even like at the very surface level, not to compare the two because they're not exactly the same, but with what everything that I'm doing right now, right? And like they'll be like, oh, this guy's got thousands of hours in the game. I got that comment the other day, and I'm like, man, I show my career profile probably once a stream, and I don't think I've broken 1,000 hours. I'm like, and
Right.
that's a
And you're
lot
also in
of
a
why.
position you're also in a position where you have like a lot of other
Oh
responsibilities that hold
yeah,
priority and rightfully so for you. So when you're in a position like that, there's really four ingredients for success across anything that you do. One is motivation,
yep,
right? You need to want to do something. You can't really force yourself to want it. You have to want it. The
yeah,
second is challenge. So whatever you're doing needs to be challenging enough to provoke growth. But the third one, the one that's right behind those two, is energy.
mm-hmm.
And if you don't have the energy or a capability of putting in those hours, like you can really want it, but you just may not have the opportunity for it. You may not be privileged enough to become a pro player. Like I think any pro player right now, every single one of them has a life situation that allow them to devote more of their focus, more of their attention, more of the hours, better or worse physically,
Right,
towards the video game. And if you don't have that, like I work with a lot of people in their 20s and their 30s, it's like it's not that you can't become great at the game. You just may not be able to become the best at the game. Like even in my situation, I had to make a lot of sacrifices with my even my physical health, like getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, working 2 jobs. Um, the law to make a lot of sacrifices to get to where I was. And like most people either won't want to do that or shouldn't do that or physically can't do that. So it comes
Right.
with a lot of baggage.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what you just talked about there too is so important. And man, we could spend the rest of the night talking about that. Is just priorities,
Mm,
like in really
yeah.
setting your priorities or your priorities get set for you. That's kind of how it typically
Hmm.
goes, and I completely agree. I think that's a really good point. Well, I think the
Hmm.
the final question I think I'll kind of leave us on for the sake of time is more on like the team cohesion sense of it. I've always kind of
Yeah.
wondered two things. It's kind of there's not really a good way to put it in one way. So when looking at a team, right, in general, whether you're talking about Overwatch, you're talking about the workplace, whatever the case,
Hmm.
I've found that the most successful teams that I have seen across the board, bar none, have some semblance of friendship between them.
Hmm.
This isn't just a we're coworkers or in this case we're teammates. This is a like, oh yeah, no, I know so and so, they're like a homie. We happen to work
Yeah.
together or we happen to game together.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of wondering, at least in my mind, I visualize an Overwatch team being no different in that sense, where it's not that you can't succeed without friendship between the players, but that the opportunity for success becomes exponentially higher if that exists. And I guess my question would be that, followed by uh, more of a specific question about language barrier. I've always wondered
Hmm. Yeah.
because obviously gaming stretches a very diverse, I mean, it's all over the world, it's literally international. And
Yeah.
obviously, we have three predominant, I would say, obviously to me, three predominant languages spoken. You have English, you have Korean, and then I believe Saudi Arabian. If that's I'm not sure their language, to be honest with you, but a little bit of ignorance on my part.
That's
but
right.
but I think that I've always wondered in those two kind of facets: A, friendship being a big thing, and B, are language barriers even an issue in a gaming setting?
So we'll touch on the language barriers really fast because I think it directly translates to your first point. But yeah, I mean, language barriers are definitely a thing. I've only had limited work with them. I worked with a Korean only speaking student with Uprising Academy, and it was very difficult. I did a lot of one on ones with him, very painstakingly discussing with him, and his English was really bad. Um, so I think yeah, it's a huge problem. It's a huge issue because part of the ingredients for success is that sense of camaraderie, that common objective, and even from just a strategical side of thing, knowing exactly what people are doing and what you need, where you need to be going. Because even if the person has okay English, that English will often take part to kind of translate what's being happened, take some of their attention away from what's on their screen. So whatever actions that they take are no longer instinctual. My student that I was working on, the Korean student, was putting a lot of emphasis on his communication, and his mechanics would get worse because he would be thinking about what he needed to say and not about what he needed to do. And so what I found a lot of teams have done is that like developing basic code words, code names, getting comfortable, just repetition. But I think more so than anything else, you definitely need to kind of like break apart the segmentation between the Korean players and the English players. And I don't know if that's easily done without a team house. And I think most successful mixed teams that we've seen have been teams that are able to kind of mix these players together. I think coaches that do a great job are ones that both have required mandatory team activities with both sides of the equation, but then also give some time for players to be their own individuals and set up. I mean, you're going to have friend groups, you're going to have little cliques. I think it's letting that happen is naturally is okay, but then having certain designated times. All right, we got to be a team here. Let's hang out. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. I know Askoft, a coach I greatly respect, had something a little bit like that. Not as much with the mixed team, but even with just the English speaking teams, right? Like, let's not go off on our own little cliques. Let's at the end of a game, let's go to McDonald's, let's hang out, let's chat, let's relax for an hour, and then you're allowed to go do whatever you want. So you kind of have a little bit of mandatory and then let the rest develop naturally. But I think that's really challenging to do that interpersonally, uh, long distance. If you don't, especially if you have a mixed team, it just doesn't work. And I was part of a team without a team house that all spoke English, and we had the exact same issues, right? So I joined on with London Spitfire halfway through their disastrous season, and by the time that I joined that team, and I've talked about it before, I mean, it was a train wreck. Like half the players didn't want to be there, half the players had given up. and I guess this kind of goes into your point of like the friendship and the camaraderie. To be blunt here and a little bit narrative killing, success breeds friendship.
Yeah,
It's the truth
true.
of the nature. So it's easy to like the people that you're around when you're winning games, because you have this positive association. There were a couple of friendships I know, obviously won't elaborate, but there's a couple of friendships within that team and other teams that I have worked with that got strained because of the lack of success within
Yeah.
that team, and
Oh
how
yeah.
that gets interpreted from different. There's a lot more tension involved. But something maybe a little bit more actionable and a little bit more cheerful is that I think it's a little bit easier to develop those friendships and camaraderie when you have people with similar visions and similar goals. There's been times when I've coached where there have been players on the team that we go back to the recipe for success. It starts with the motivation, and motivation can be infectious, but it does have to at some point be intrinsically driven,
Yeah.
right? And if you have certain players that are motivated to perform and practice at a certain level and have certain goals, and other players that are not, then you can't that's going to cause tension at some point. The second that you start to lose games, that's going to be the first breaking point. And I've had that many times. Whereas if you have players that are both giving concerted effort, even when adversity strikes, because they feel like they're on a similar vision, there's a little bit more trust there. And I think a lot of that can be set by the coach, not only in selecting the roster with players with similar visions, but also obviously by setting that standard yourself, like by holding yourself to that standard, and keeping other players held to that standard as well. As like you create that culture. But that's easier said than done.
Hmm.
Obviously, cracks will show at tension points. There's never been a team that I've worked with, even the best teams that I've worked with, have never been perfectly smooth sailing. Um, I think when he talks about the friendship and camaraderie, that is a side effect of a team culture that is obsessed about good practice, but also developing good friendships and health. And I also think that's a symptom or a consequence of having a culture that is focused on finding players of a like mind that are willing to put in the effort and put in the work. Like two players that come to mind right now is like Hottie and Landon. I don't have a memory of Hottie or Landon ever really having a serious disagreement. I'm sure there was some bickering here and there, but like with Hottie and Landon, you talk about two players that like when they're in the scrimmage, they're always giving 100%, and also that they've prepared for whatever they're doing. Um, there was never any tension really between them because they both knew that the other was always doing their best. There's never a question about that whatsoever. And so it's really easy. They weren't best buds, hugging and whatever, but they were close. They trusted each other because of the consistency of the vision, right? And I think if you can keep that, then it makes things a lot easier.
Sure. Yeah, I completely can see that. And I think too, as a very brief subset, is that you keep
Sure.
talking about motivation, which is huge.
Mm-hmm.
I'm big on
Yep.
that. But I also think, and I'd be curious to hear where your thoughts are on this. I also think that discipline obviously is massive, and I'm sure I don't think you would necessarily
Mm-hmm.
disagree with that. But I would wonder, in my mind, I've always seen discipline as the thing that outweighs motivation, because motivation, even when you are chasing something that you are very passionate and fired up about, you're going to have days where you just don't feel like doing it,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter if it's Overwatch, going
Mm-hmm.
to the gym, eating better, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that discipline is the fallback, where you, at least in my mind, where like, yeah, the
The
motivation's gone,
training.
but
Mm-hmm.
I know that I need to do this, so I'm going to keep doing this. Um,
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, I mean, with discipline, it's essentially putting yourself standards of what I expect out of myself and what I know that I need to get done. The tricky part with discipline is it, as you know, demands a lot of maturity to know how to interpret.
yeah,
I've worked a lot. This is not just an Overwatch thing, but this is a big thing within the fitness community with a lot of the people that I've worked with. It's a big thing in the martial arts community: Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing, wrestling, where discipline is basically paraphrased as doing what you don't want to do,
right.
essentially.
Sure.
Whereas reality discipline is more so doing what you ought to do.
Correct.
Sometimes discipline is not doing something.
Yeah.
Sometimes discipline is saying, no, I'm not going to do that, or I'm going to lay off, or I'm injured, or, I need to get my sleep, or I can only like discipline at times has been, no, we're not going to do this scrim block because we're too tired, we're too tilted to put effort into that scrim block.
Right.
So we're not going to do it. It's hard to say we're passing up practice, but it takes discipline to make that decision. So to me, discipline and willpower is like something that you have to spin with a lot of maturity and a lot of wisdom. Is this something that I don't want to do because It's uncomfortable, but I probably should do it? Or is it something that I'm just doing it because it's difficult? And because it's difficult, it's something that I ought to do. And I think that's something where you have to be very careful with drawing the line, where there's a lot of young men, especially out there, that we romanticize difficulty for the sake of difficulty.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes we miss the forest for the trees, right? There are so many important things that deserve that priority. And I think the other really important thing is that from what we know, we only have so much willpower in a day to do things that we wouldn't otherwise do. So if you want to increase your discipline, you need to know what you need to be focusing on. What is especially challenging for you that is really important. That deserves your attention to discipline, right? And I think the other thing as well is that you should be putting our focus on developing discipline through processes, through habits,
Yeah.
right? Things
Yeah.
so
Huge.
that we can do these things without thinking. There's many things that you do that are great that probably don't take as much discipline as they did initially because it's part of your process,
Right.
right? So now you can discipline yourself in other ways. And it's definitely the same thing with me. But if I had done everything at once, like I know so many people have done, so many of my students, so many of my players have done, either done too much at once or try to do too many things at once, inevitably they fall off the train and they're no further off than they were 6 months ago. And I don't think that that was through a lack of discipline necessarily. It's through a lack of maturity and a lack of wisdom.
Right.
You have to
Absolutely.
start small and you have to stick with it. You have to use that discipline power to focus yourself to greater things, and then you kind of build off of that. But it's very infectious and very contagious and very exciting to watch a YouTube motivational video and do it all in one day. And then,
Yeah.
but I've never met somebody that watched a YouTube motivational video that snapped their fingers and fixed it. So
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. Well, I think that's really good, man. And I really appreciate it because I think that's a lot of it is just really understanding that, like you said, maturity is big, like realizing where the
yeah,
balancing act is of, okay, am I doing this because I think it's a good idea and I just don't feel like
yeah,
it? Or am I doing this because I feel like the pain is somehow rewarding? And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
massive. So anyway,
yeah,
seems that my
absolutely.
camera has decided
That's fine.
it's decided
That's fine. You look
it's
a little funny, a
cooked.
new haircut or
Yeah,
something, you know?
something, yeah. Something very square with some text. I don't understand what's going on.